You read the title, you clicked the video, this is my FNAF game tier list. Just like my last tier list video, we have a lot to talk about, so let's just get into it. FNAF 1. A trendsetter that started the original FNAF formula that I still love to this day, but a B tier game in this tier list. I know that might seem a bit low for the very first game in the series, but it's just that a lot of the games that come after it take the concepts it introduced to a whole new level that warrants a higher tier than B. But I do love this game. Not just because of nostalgia, but also because it feels like a well-made balance of unique game mechanics that play off each other really well, even if it is a bit simple. After almost 10 years, I still find the gameplay engaging, the characters scary but memorable, the jokes to be funny, and the little vague hints of a story to be interesting. I know that sounds like the description of an A or S tier game, but some of its sequels took all these pros and pushed them so far that they end up in higher tiers, making what would be an A or S tier game like FNAF 1 a B tier game retroactively. It doesn't mean this game is bad or even necessarily worse than others in this tier list, it's just that some of the games we're about to talk about are even better in my opinion. So yeah, B tier. FNAF 2, one of the aforementioned quote-unquote better games. It just takes everything introduced in its predecessor and doubles down on everything that made it enjoyable. There are several new layers of depth to the gameplay with the music box, Freddy mask, and flashlight, but the mechanics that were dropped leave just as much of an impact to the player as the mechanics that were added. Those that played FNAF 1 first, which was most people, feel so much more unsafe in this office. Even without a power level to worry about, the extra entryway in the office and the lack of doors to protect them cranks the anxiety level up to 11. However, it's important to keep in mind that, despite the gameplay having new complexity, it's still not too much to handle and is very intuitive and easy to pick up. Not to mention the animatronic roster is over double the previous game. A big roster that feels samey or not eye-catching / interesting will still be boring despite its size. Thankfully, FNAF 2 avoids this issue very well. The different animatronics feel really unique from each other. Mangle is more than just a pig Foxy, it's an endoskeleton spider monster with 2 heads and police static, you know what I mean? Even the small things like the comedy or plot hints have been upgraded from FNAF 1. The jokes are funnier, and this game introduces the iconic cryptic 8-bit minigames that still have lore relevance to this day. With all this time I've spent describing how this game takes everything a B tier game did well and made it even better, you'd probably assume this game goes in the tier directly above it, but you'd be wrong. The thing is, I don't think any game in the series has taken everything FNAF 2 did well and made it even better. I'm not at all saying FNAF 2 is the best game in the series, I'm just saying I don't think any other game does what it does better, so into the S tier it goes. FNAF 3, what was almost the end of the franchise. I have to be honest with you, I'm not as in love with this game as I am with its prequels. It really comes down to personal taste more than anything, since I don't necessarily believe that FNAF 3's game mechanics were done poorly, I simply prefer FNAF 1 and FNAF 2's gameplay loop more. But this game does have a lot going for it. It has the most direct story so far, but it's still very mysterious and vague. The fact that we see Purple Guy get springlocked at the end of the game and then come to a realization that we've been going up against him in a 1v1 the whole time was a really well executed twist. But I also have a couple issues with this game. Having to only deal with a single animatronic feels less intense than the battalion we were facing in the last game, and the phantoms feel less like a game mechanic and more like an excuse to throw cheap jump scares at the player. So overall it's not a bad game by any means, but I definitely think it's not as good as the first two, so I'm putting it in C tier. FNAF 4, what was also almost the end of the franchise. I really like this game. It was a risky move for Scott to remove the camera mechanic, since the player is stuck in one room, and the camera lets us get some new visuals rather than just one flat screen of the office, or bedroom in this case. We even see this problem crop up in a future game, but for FNAF 4, it works well, since even though the player is still technically in one room, we're constantly moving around in it. We're always changing our perspective and getting a new angle on the visuals, so the game never looks or feels stagnant. The gameplay itself is also really fun, and in my opinion, it was the scariest FNAF game up to that point. Having to lean in and quietly listen for weird breathing noises is so scary in real life, and from an immersive gameplay perspective, we feel safer with the doors closed, so forcing us to have to open the door during gameplay, knowing an animatronic could be right there, is very smart and very spooky. It's also really cool how FNAF 4 intentionally makes it so that you cannot have every door closed at once. In FNAF 1, you could close both doors and feel a little bit safer, but that's not possible here. You're always in danger and the game sells it really well, especially because your entryways aren't all in front of you like in previous games. Now you need to turn around and check your blind spot. Really clever. But more so than the gameplay, the story and how it interacts with the gameplay is why I love FNAF 4 so much. The game really took the middle of the night 8-bit minigames up a notch with a dedicated continual plot and story. Having all the teasers ask us, "Was it me?" in reference to the bite of 87, and having the final cutscene end with a sudden and brutal animatronic chomp, even though we now know it was the bite of 83, was really smart on Scott's part, since at this point, the bite was one of the biggest mysteries of the franchise. And again, I love how the story ties in with the gameplay. We see quote-unquote plush trap in the 8-bit minigame, and so face him between nights. We have a group of animatronic plushies in the 8-bit minigame, and so we face a plush Foxy and a plush Freddy in our room. Even though we can't see where Nightmare Bonnie and Chica come from, I bet you if we could, they would be a Bonnie plush and a Chica plush off screen, that would later spawn a Nightmare animatronic just like the other two. And most of all, the fact that the final night is fighting against just Fredbear, who we just saw bite a child's head in the 8-bit minigame, now being our final boss, is just brilliant. And there are so many little neat details I haven't not mentioned yet, like how you can tell if Nightmare Chica is away from the door if you hear sounds in the kitchen, and little mysteries we still don't really have a firm answer for, why like Mangle is in this little girl's room, and why this little girl looks so similar to Circus Baby. I can't really ask for anything else. This is an S-tier FNAF game through and through. FNAF World, the franchise's first dip into madness. I have mixed feelings. The weird lore is pretty interesting and gives purpose to a character that is otherwise completely pointless in the plot, and it's honestly just a fun spin-off. I like how you have to build your roster in weird ways, like getting Nightmarion via Foxy.exe. And I love how each animatronic has unique moves that have to do with their lore, like again Nightmarion having fourth wall, since it was technically not canon up until this game. But even though it's not a bad RPG/game per se, I don't really think it holds a real candle to the very best of the games in the series from both a fun/gameplay level and a story/lore level, so into the D tier it goes. Sister location. A lot of people point to Help Wanted 1 or Security Breach and say, FNAF is not the same as before, Steel Wool ruined it. But to be quite honest, I think this game is when Five Nights at Freddy's actually changed. Think about it. This is the game where we got our first in-game villain with a written dialogue and personality, in Circus Baby. It was the first game that dipped into sci-fi themes. It was the first game to use supplemental material in the books to explain stuff and tie story elements in. It's the first game where we properly move around in locations instead of being in one location. It's the first game where the gameplay is different each night. I could go on, but I think you get my point. I understand why Scott decided to move FNAF into a different direction with this game, since the whole franchise had expanded in so many directions at this point. But even though I both love OG FNAF and modern FNAF in different ways and for different reasons, this transition game was rough, dude. I think it had a lot of potential. The sister location themed levels in Help Wanted 1 and 2 are some of my favorites. And it's not that I dislike sister location just because it's different. I legitimately think almost all the gameplay is unfun. The only parts of the game I genuinely enjoyed during sister location were the Biddy Bag segment, the Funtime Freddy Breaker Room segment, and the non-canon office nights. Literally everything else in the game was just flat out not fun for me. To be clear, even though I dislike most of the gameplay, there are parts of the game that I think are really enjoyable. Circus Baby is, in my opinion, FNAF's best villain. Not just because William, Vanny, and the Mimic don't actually have any real writing or depth to them in the games, William especially has almost no character in the game continuity, but Scott does a genuinely good job at writing intriguing dialogue for Baby. Even if you have problems with Scott's overall plot writing, he's genuinely great at writing monologues. Standouts include Baby's Night 4 speech, Adult Charliebot speech to Teen Charliebot, and Henry's Pizza Sim speech. But yeah, Baby is really good, which makes it all the more disappointing that her cunning, faux innocent personality and fascinating relationship with the soul that possesses her was dropped after this game. Anyway, E tier. It has some redeeming qualities that stop it from being an F, but if I can only enjoy like 20% of a game, it's not going to be on a very high tier. Pizzeria Simulator. A marked improvement. I don't care what people say, I think the pizzeria design section is a lot of fun. It's not too fleshed out, but I can really appreciate how every attraction in the pizzeria has its own minigame, some of which have fascinating lore and some of which are just really funny. I think the salvage segments are also really creepy and avoid the problem FNAF 3 had of just feeling like cheap jump scares. This game also introduces post-death voice lines, which I love. They add so much character to the animatronics and I wish they kept them in Security Breach and Ruin. Onto the main office gameplay though, the actual mechanics I think are really fun. Forcing the player to decide when they win with the computer's tasks instead of telling them to outlast the clock was a needed twist on the FNAF formula, and it really works. The other smaller mechanics like sound, heat, etc. are also enjoyable, but what I don't like is the lack of cameras. I think the animatronics being stuck in vents we can't see really takes a toll on the visual enjoyment of the game. We can't even see the animatronics get closer to us in the vents. The only times we see the enemies we're up against is when they kill us, and I do not like that. It doesn't ruin the game by any means, but it does stunt my enjoyment a bit. B tier. Ultimate Custom Night. Not quite a spin-off title? I don't know, it's hard for me to stand firm and say I like/dislike UCN. Again, I love the post-death voice lines, and these ones have even more character packed into them. I think the puppet probably has my favorite voice lines, but I also really like Ballora's with their chicas, lefties, and especially Mangle's. Maybe I should make a UCN voice line tier list video one day. In terms of the gameplay, I really like how animatronics that never got an office segment like the Rockstars get their own gimmicks to play around with in this game. And I like how almost every animatronic has a unique gimmick, and how those gimmicks are connected, like how both Lefty and the puppet's gimmicks have to do with the music box. Ultimately, because Ultimate Custom Night is a custom FNAF, it's sort of hard to judge on the same criteria as other games. But simply looking at how much fun I have playing UCN over other FNAF games, I have to put it in A tier, which to be honest is a decent bit higher than I expected. Help Wanted 1, Steelbull's first FNAF. I think I like this game. To be fully honest, I haven't played the whole thing. I've played parts of it, and I enjoyed those parts. The parts and service levels, the Night Terror levels, and the event repair levels are the best ones in my opinion. But yeah, for this game, Curse of Dreadbear and Help Wanted 2, take my opinions with a grain of salt because unlike the other games on this list, I haven't fully experienced them. In terms of story and writing, this game is the one that kind of stated that FNAF 1 through 6 are maybe possibly sort of in-universe games. And it did bring Afton back, which I don't hate necessarily, but I do wish he was retired as a villain and Vanny became the new series mainstay Big Bad, but we'll get to her later. I like the tape collecting gimmick, and I really like how well they get the player to be unsure on whether they should trust Tape Girl or not. If we were going off just gameplay, then this game would probably be an A or S tier, but since stuff like story and writing is also being graded, and because this is my personal tier list, which will be biased by my personal taste to an extent, I have to give it a B. Curse of Dreadbear. I haven't really played this DLC because it was too scary, but I did watch it get played and it looked like a lot of fun. Even though the lore still confuses me, I think it's an objectively good game from a gameplay standpoint. I don't have a lot to say, simply because I didn't experience much of it firsthand, but from what I've seen, I'd say it deserves an A tier. Special Delivery. It had potential. I wish that it fulfilled that potential, but it didn't really. There seemed to be a lot of stuff planned for Lefty/Charlie, since she has fully finished assets, a completed marketing image, and has been teased since the literal start of the game, but none of that made it in. The AR emails seemed like they had the capacity to be interesting, but they didn't really apply to the main game series or tell us anything intriguing outside of, ooh, Vanessa is acting weird. The gameplay itself isn't unfun on paper, but it is super repetitive, and the game does very little to fix that. I can say that I enjoyed the different mechanics each animatronic has, but it feels like making skins and making merch based off those skins to sell to children was prioritized over making an engaging story, much less an engaging game. And I can't in good conscience place something like that any higher than the F tier. Security Breach. This game is hard to talk about simply because it felt like it was almost my favorite FNAF game. To get the obvious stuff out of the way, yeah, Steelbull released a very, very buggy and unfinished game. That lack of quality assurance already sort of limits how high I can put Security Breach. I didn't actually encounter many bugs when I played Security Breach, which was a day after launch because I fell asleep waiting for it to download. The worst bug I think I got was getting under Freddy's stomach hatch as Mapbot gave me a map, and so I couldn't get back into Freddy because I think the game thought I was still inside. I had to restart my save. To be honest though, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. I love the daycare section, Phaser Blast, the Endo section, Monty's boss fight, and the DJ Music Man boss fight of course. Outside of those parts, it was mostly just running around and getting lost. But I still enjoyed myself. I know people said this game wasn't scary, and yes, I agree, it wasn't as scary as previous FNAF games, but to me, it was scarier than Ruin was. I'm not trying to throw shade at Ruin, I'm just saying that I did get scared playing Security Breach. And people are always blaming the bright neon environments as taking away the creepy factor, but I'm so glad we have a game where we get to see a giant Chuck E. Cheese / Dave & Buster's-esque FNAF Super Mall. It's very pretty and fun to look at. In terms of story, I'm not a fan. I don't like how the game is set up to have a billion different unimportant endings and like 2 important ones. Instead of giving us a bunch of different branching options of who to decommission and if we should leave the Pizzaplex and from where, just let the story happen to include all the gameplay segments you worked on. And instead of having a billion different endings, just give us 2 or 3, so you can actually animate them instead of giving us these unsatisfying storyboards. And don't force the player to restart if they die during the endgame. Words can't express how much I wish Vanny wasn't shoved aside. She could have been so cool. I'm glad at least newer games seem to be saying she's still around, but I really wish she was the final boss of Security Breach instead of Burn Trap. I wish her animations hadn't got cut, I wish her voice lines hadn't got cut. I wish she as a character hadn't got cut. I don't want to harp on about this point for too long since I know it's been talked about a lot already, but man, it was disappointing to not get what we were told to expect. But I want to be clear and say even though I wish we received what we were promised, I still really enjoyed what we got. I hate the blob though. B tier. Ruin. First things first, I want to give major props to Steel Wolf for recognizing they released an unfinished game and did their best to atone by making a free DLC that had genuine effort put into it. I like Ruin a lot. I think it's fun, well-paced, and I really prefer the more linear challenges found here than Security Breach's open world thing it had going on. I do have issues with it, like the marketing emphasis on Chica only for the game to be about Roxy, and sort of dislike the Mimic as an antagonist. I was kind of hoping this DLC would flesh out either Vanny or the Blob instead of throwing another villain at us. But Ruin was crafted as a very good little companion to Security Breach. We got some hints about an Eclipse character, and even though what we saw in Security Breach isn't Eclipse but more likely Jack Moon, we still got an Eclipse character in Ruin. There was a huge cut Shattered Freddy segment in Security Breach, so we got a piece of that here. And everyone wanted to see Glamrock Bonnie, so they showed us what he looks like and what happened to him. Is the fact that the fan service seems to have changed Ruin from what it was originally supposed to be a little off-putting? I guess so. But I think it's just better than Security Breach in most aspects, and I had a ton of fun playing it, despite its flaws. A tier. Help Wanted 2. If you've been observing this channel for a while, you're probably aware of my experience with this game. I really tried to play it, but due to technical difficulties, which after several weeks and a lot of money I realized was Steel Wolf's fault, I wasn't able to. It was very stressful and irritating, and you'd think something like that would sour me on this game forever. But nope. Even if I had never really got to play the game properly, I can say from an objective standpoint, the game is well made. A lot of time and effort clearly went into making the game look good, and it shows. Help Wanted 1 already looked good for VR, but this game looks amazing. The animations are fluid, the textures are polished, it's just jaw-dropping. Don't even get me started on the gameplay. I love almost every level. I don't even have time to talk about all the little things in every minigame that I adore. And the mid-game twist is so well executed. The entire story itself is really well written for the most part, in my opinion. There's only a couple things about this game that I could point to and say, I don't like this. But since the things I don't enjoy are so greatly outnumbered by the things I do enjoy, I might as well go over them here. I think it's a major bummer that Monty does not have any minigame dedicated to him. I love Chica, but she already has one minigame about her eating food. She did not need another one. The Staffbot Soda Management minigame should have been replaced with the Monty minigame. I really wish Mystic Hippo was something more than a PSVR eye-tracking tech demo. And I wish I was able to play the game. With all that said, it's still an S tier for me. And that's every mainline game. This should go without saying, but I got a lot of angry comments on my last tier list video, so I want to say, this kind of tier list is very subjective, and it's okay if you disagree with me. Just be respectful to other people even if their opinions differ from yours. Oh, and the link for this tier list is in the pinned comment. Thanks for watching, bye.